Good evening, everyone. Is this on? Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here and sharing your Saturday night with us here at your Sacramento Philharmonic Opera on this Saturday night here in downtown Sacramento. My name is Lora Painter, weekday evening anchor at ABC 10, also here in Sacramento. You guys are in for a real treat this evening. We have such a big lineup of beautiful French music, and tonight we have our special guest here on stage, the maestro himself, our conductor, François López-Ferrer.
You said it with the two accents.
Okay.
And she even said it with two required accents.
We must make them feel at home. And also our international star cellist, Narek Hakhnazaryan January.
I just told backstage this evening that Lora is one of very, very few people who attempt it from the first time and get it correctly, my last name.
Well, we are so pleasured and blessed to have both of you here and sharing your talents with us here on the stage here at Sacramento. I want to start with you, Narek. I understand you are from Armenia, and since growing up there, have lived quite an international life as well. Can you shed some light on what it was like growing up in Armenia and the musical culture there? What was your childhood like? I know you're from a musical family, but bring us into that cultural world.
Well, growing up in Armenia, it's quite different from Western world, and I'm very proud, and I feel myself blessed that I'm Armenian. I'm very proud of my country, my nation's heritage. But you know, back in the 90s, when I was growing up there, it was quite challenging at times because Armenia was part of Soviet Union, and after the collapse of Soviet Union, economically, it was really, 90s were the years of struggles for pretty much all ex-Soviet Union countries. So it's in a way I'm grateful for that path which I took, because I started appreciating things which maybe other people from other countries don't really appreciate and take it for granted. And the musical scene in country was fantastic, and the education, I think it was the heritage of Soviet education, Soviet musical school, which, you know, whatever attitude we have to Soviet Union, we cannot deny that the Soviet musical school and heritage is quite significant, and that transported to Armenia also, that influenced Armenia, so I was very fortunate.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'd like to ask you, what was it about the cello that resonated with you, that spoke with you, and how did you find your voice in the cello? I spoke with another professional cellist, and she describes it as having the most commonality with the human voice, and that's what drew her to it. I wonder if you feel the same way.
I do now. I didn't when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and believe me or not, I'm sure, I'm positive that there is not a single normal child in this world who would enjoy practicing scales few hours a day. So and that's what we have to do for a few years of our education. And you know, I would not describe the first cello sounds which kids make as a very beautiful sounds. So, no, I mean, of course I'm joking. It's what I'm trying to say is that the first this push and impulse was because of my parents, who are also musicians, professors of German Conservatory, and they saw potential in me. I was already accustomed to music when my mom was pregnant with me, because she was concertizing, she was teaching me, and so I'm pretty sure I heard music before I was born. So that path was kind of inevitable for me, you know, to continue. And I'm thankful to my parents that they saw the potential and they forced me to practice, to not waste the talent, otherwise I would probably not sit here tonight.
Oh, I wonder then, is that the advice you have for some of the younger audience members or some of the younger guests you may have, and other younger musicians as well, to just stick with it, listen to your mom and dad? You don't want to
it depends. I mean, when your mom and dad tell you to practice 10 hours a day, probably not. You know, my dad taught me one very important thing is not about quantity, it's about quality. So I wasn't like a working horse, you know, practicing all day long. We were working together with my dad very productively. So, and that attitude remained with me till now. I'm pretty sure till the rest of my life. So I'm able to concentrate on maximum and achieve the result which other people might not concentrate that much, and they might practice for hours and reach each the same result as I do, which I do in like 40 minutes. I'm not bragging, it's just the different approaches, and I'm pretty sure that the quality approach is the better one.
So let's expand on that. François, how do you prepare as a conductor? How do you prepare for a show much differently than I would suspect a solo artist or a featured artist?
Well, I pray a lot for the concert. No, I mean, of course, you know, I spend a lot of time with the music. I sit at the piano, I analyze, I listen to a lot of different recordings, and to get to know certain traditions. If I were just to read the score of the SAINT-SAΕNS number 1, Cello number 1, which we're performing for you this evening, as written, and interpreted it just that way, we would not have, it would have fallen apart at some point in the rehearsal. Because there's a lot of things that are based on tradition, things that are just natural, also to the nature of the instrument. So I get to know different interpretations, and then of course, come up with my own, and then meet with the soloist, in this case Narek, and blend our interpretations together and come up with our very own. And each performance, of course, will be very different. And I'm very excited for this evening to make music with you.
So how long have you guys then worked together before this concert? And I know that's usually very, very brief for such, you know, renowned artists who travel around the world, and you're only meeting for a couple of days and making magic. So can you bring us, you know, pull back the curtain a little bit of when did you guys first meet?
Well, Thursday. Quite the show. Thursday evening.
Yes, not even after. We just evening rehearsal on Thursday evening. We rehearsed for about an hour and a half for the orchestra. We had about 30 minutes before, which would have been enough time to go through the concerto, but we mainly spent it talking, just getting to know each other and gossiping.
To be a fly on the wall. Well, speaking of the preparation, Narek, we had to let you go so that you have enough time to warm up and practice and do your processes so we can see you for that beautiful Camille Saint-Saëns cello concerto number 1 that you're going to be performing for us later. So, please, sir, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Still have some time.
I'm ready for my close-up now.
Yes. Mr. DeMille, no. All right, so, you know, I wanted to talk more about, so you grew up in Cincinnati.
I grew up in Cincinnati. As you can tell from my name, very Midwestern. François López-Ferrer. I grew up in Cincinnati.
And his accent, too.
Actually,
very Midwest.
A good icebreaker with the orchestra, because it's my first time in the orchestra, so when I came, I started the rehearsal and I said, very nice to meet all of you. I'm sorry to disappoint you if you were expecting a very nice French accent. You're not going to get it this week, so.
So I wanted to talk about your childhood. Your father was also an amazing music director, so you had a lot of music in your life growing up. How did that influence the music that you want to pursue as an adult?
It influenced me in exactly the opposite manner. I wanted to be more practical growing up. When I was 6 years old, I wanted to become a lawyer, or a doctor, or something, you know, something productive. And then I wanted to become like a rock musician, probably, or like. Then I started composing, but composing pop music. I always played piano growing up, but I was not like Narek. I was not responsible doing my scales. My piano teacher was extremely disappointed in me every week. Because I would come, she would, you know, give me a whatever A-flat major scale, and then I would just improvise around it. So I enjoyed improvising on the piano. I wanted to create something and not reproduce what was already done. So it started out with kind of pop music recording my friends in my basement with my Pro Tools, and then I was introduced to my composition professor in Cincinnati, and Then got into conservatory for my bachelor's in composition. At that time I took a choral conducting course. And I remember I was just shivering after 5 minutes of moving my hands. No, from the emotion. Of course I was very nervous, my goodness. But from the emotion of just making music with nothing more than your hands. And you know, it was probably 16 people, my colleagues in the choir. And at that moment, I decided to pursue conducting.
You know, I really appreciate that perspective because as I spoke to other conductors, they haven't quite described it in that kind of a way, making music just with your hands, and these with other people's voices, right? So when you're standing in front of all of these musicians and kind of praying and hoping that they listen to you and get all the pieces right in unison and different parts they got to do. What is that like for you when you step in front of a new orchestra, a new group, like you just met Narek a couple of days ago, and you're meeting a new group of people here, and you've performed all around the world. So how do you kind of adjust, and what is it like for you that first time? Do you still get those butterflies?
Oh, every time. Every time I'm filled with butterflies before a rehearsal, especially before concerts. My wife can tell you I'm just freaking out the whole day, and then walk on stage and it all disappears. But you never somehow get over that. But it's a good kind of nerves to have. But with any orchestra, of course, you come, you play more than speak. Especially in the beginning of the first rehearsal, you get to know the musicians. You make music with them, and look at their faces. You learn about their personality. And then you see who needs more of your help in certain places, who's a little bit more attentive, who needs to more attention to lift their faces up to. I mean, our job as a conductor, primarily more than anything, beyond just keeping tempo and interpreting a piece of music together, is to inspire. Because we know this music, Bolero. I'm sure this is not necessarily a new piece for you. Maybe your first time hearing it live, which is a very special experience. Actually, I've only heard it once live in my life. I've conducted it about 50 times, but I've only heard it live once, so it's a special experience. But it's like Bolero. They know it, and it's extremely repetitive. So my job there is to make. It's not even to beat, but to maintain that energy and build the crescendo of the orchestra and make it as if it's a brand new piece for them. And you're very lucky here at Sacramento. You have an incredibly engaged orchestra, very cultivated sound, and I'm having such a great time.
That deserves a round of applause. And I love when you mentioned Bolero, and some people were chuckling. I think you guys were thinking of the movie 10, Boat there, Dudley Moore. Is that where your minds went? Okay, we're going to keep it a little more sophisticated, I think. But let's talk more about RAVEL. So we had RAVEL last week, and this is pretty much this really well-known piece, I think, as far as in the pop culture world. I wanted to get your thoughts on, when we think of classical music, when it gets adopted into pop culture, commercials and movies, do you think that sort of pop culture venue helps this music stay alive and be introduced to new audiences that may not have heard it, and do you find value in that?
Of course, I mean, I think about it like a little bit like the American songbook. That repertoire stays alive. It stays constantly alive through different singers, through different groups of instruments that bring that music to life. And I mean, this music is our heritage. It speaks about the human condition. It speaks of our culture. It speaks of our aesthetic at the time. French music in the 19th and 20th centuries primarily, they were as much living in the past as in the future. Mostly in the future, but also very much connected to the past. And we see a little bit of that, both ends of the spectrum in tonight's program. The Saint-SAΕNS cello concerto, he was more of a traditionalist. He uses the traditional kind of 3-movement structure of the concerto, but actually one movement. So it's one long movement, but with 3 sections. So in that sense, it was kind of adhering to the fashion of the time, which was not to compose something classical in structure, but he was at the same time. And then Ravel just gave that all up. He never composed a symphony, for example. That was forbidden in the 19th century in the Paris Conservatory. There only exists really the French Symphony in D minor, Georges Bizet, his Symphony in C, which he composed when he was 18 years old, as an exercise. It was really something that was a taboo at the time, not to do. And Ravel, you know, he was a great lover of the waltz. And this piece that we hear tonight, it's not that often performed for the full orchestra version, but it's an incredibly charming piece. The Valse Noble et Sentimentale, the noble and sentimental waltzes, which was written in a kind of way as an homage to Franz Schubert, who also composed a collection of works with the same title, but he actually specifies, Schubert does, the difference between which waltzes are sentimental and which are noble. Ravel doesn't do that, and he would never specify much in his music. If anything, he would rather not speak about it. You know, he was clearly an impressionist composer, but he hated the term. So he wanted to live kind of on another level. But it's an incredibly charming work in 8 movements, and I think spending so much time with this piece, I find that there's as much sentimentality as nobility in every single moment. There's not one moment is this and one moment is that. Even the beginning, which is pompous. There's this kind of both sentimentality and nobility at the same time. And one of my favorite pieces of all time, which he completed about 9 years after this work in 1920, was La Valse, which was as much an homage to his love for the Viennese waltz, but also the destruction of the waltz, because he epitomizes everything that the waltz stands for. You know, picturesque, you know, the Danube, nature, but it takes place kind of in city life, and the Roaring 20s. It's an anticipation of the Roaring 20s and all that came with that. You know, progressive, you know, industrialism, and he destroys it at the end. This piece that we're here tonight is a kind of 8-movement sketch of what then he incorporates into La Valse some years later. Yeah, it's an incredible work of music, and I really hope you'll enjoy discovering it tonight.
Yes, I find they are also rousing and romantic in a way, and sweeping, and very familiar in a way too. So I think there's a lot for everyone to enjoy, and that about wraps up our pre-concert chat, lecture for the evening right now. We're going to let François join the rest of the group and prepare as well. And thank you so much for joining us here for this pre-concert talk. Hopefully you learned a lot as well. So we have a nice lineup for you. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.